Hello everybody, I'm Paul Ducklin from Naked Security at Sophos. Welcome back to another week's Naked Security live video. Let's crack straight on with it. As you can see, a slightly mysterious title this week, like last week, The Gift Card Hackers and How to Avoid Them. Now, if you've already read, there's an article with a similar title on nakedsecurity.sophos.com. If you've already looked at that, you'll have an idea of where we're going. And the plan today is that we are going to be talking about the kind of cyber crooks who are perfectly into breaking into your network, hacking into your stuff, running around on your network, but are not specifically interested in implanting malware or ultimately ending up with a ransomware attack. So not every crook wants to do that. These are perhaps, you might say, less sophisticated crooks. On the other hand, there's still an awful lot of money that they stand to make, either by getting you to buy things for them, you as individuals or the company in general, and by finding data on your network. And instead of using it to blackmail you like the ransomware crooks, we don't know what they got away with in this particular case. We assume that what they want to do is take that data away and actually sell it on the dark web. So they're in, they run around quickly, there's not much planning, it's not a long scale thing like you imagine typical ransomware attack is, where they're mapping out your network and they're going for the big bucks at the end. In this case, the idea is get in and get you to buy them as many gift cards as they can. And why gift cards? Well, we think the reason is very simple, namely that you imagine that if I break into your computer and I'm able to go into your browser and I'm able to go into one of your online accounts, like maybe your account with the supermarket, and you've left your credit card on file, and I go in and order something and click the button, then that means you're paying for something. But if I'm using cached information from your browser, of course, then what's going to happen is that stuff will get delivered to you. So for the crooks, although it would be very annoying to you because you'd order stuff that you didn't want, it would arrive, the crooks wouldn't be able to get away with anything. But if you've ever bought a gift card online, you'll know that that's a rather different type of purchase. And the idea is that you pay the money, but what happens is an email gets delivered by design to somebody else, not to you, with the intention that they can spend that money and have stuff delivered to a completely different place. So in other words, a gift card is a way of getting your money to turning your money into an email that, and as you know, typically contains a secret code and a link that you can click that will allow whoever the gift card is sent to claim it and to redeem it. And as you can imagine, if the crooks can do that over and over and over again for 10, 20, 50 or 100 people inside a company, so in other words, they've broken into the company's network and they can reach out to all the users' computers, then they don't have to break into each individual home computer one by one. And if they can do that, you can imagine that the crooks get into a company with, say, 200 users, and let's say on average, they're able to get one of each user's accounts to buy one card that's worth, say, $200, and let's say they're able to sell that card. Obviously they can't sell it at full face value. Let's say they're able to sell each card on the dark web for $50. So that's an average of one card per user. Some users, they won't be able to get into their computers, they won't have their credit cards on file, their email accounts may be locked out, so they're but for some users they might be able to buy 2 or 3 or 4 cards from different companies and send them out to their own email accounts, harvest that stuff and sell it on. If they can do those kind of numbers, which you can imagine is something that a couple of people sitting there just working away, a sort of human-led attack where they're just following a script, log in, do this, click here, try that, enter these details and so on, that they could easily make, if you do the multiplication, say $10,000 in gift cards sold online in half an afternoon. So give them a whole day, that's $40,000, give them a whole month, that's an awful lot of money that they stand to bleed from people's accounts all over. And they're not going after a company, they're going after a bunch of people who just happen to work for a company. So the reason we know about this particular attack that I want to share with you today is that the Sophos Rapid Response Team got called in when the victim realised that something was wrong. So the moral of the story at the end, as you can imagine, is going to be, if you see something, say something, and if somebody says something, do something. And by prompt action in this case, not just trying to fix the problem, understand what was needed to be done, but understand why it happened and all the implications of it, we were able to steam in and actually kick the crooks out. And in the end, they only got away with $800. This is a 200-user company. They only got away with $800 worth of gift cards. And because the reaction was quick enough, as far as we know, none of those gift cards ever got cashed out. So actually no harm was done, no money was taken. So by prompt response, even though the crooks could have had a field day, they didn't. So let's look at how this worked. Well, they got into somebody's computer. Now, let's assume that this doesn't really matter whether the person was working in the office, but in the current days, they were probably working at home. We don't know how the crooks got in. It was probably due to phishing, but for all we know, they may simply have bought a password to one person's or a few people's computers on the dark web and thought, let's start here. From that computer, it seems they were able to get in to the company's, log into the company's VPN. So they've got access to one computer where you imagine they might be able to spend $100 on, $200 on a gift card and run off with it. But suddenly they realised, right, we've got a little bit of a mini gold mine here. We've actually got access to a company's VPN. And once they were inside that VPN, they were able to use RDP, remote desktop protocol, not from outside, from inside the network, to wander around. Presumably it was used inside the company for support purposes. They were able to connect to user after user after user after user and connect to those individuals' computers. So even if they broke in from someone who was working at home, they're in the VPN, they're using RDP to wander around, they're connecting to somebody else's computer. That could be in a completely different household. But as far as the crooks and the network are concerned, they've got access to all of this in one go. And then the modus operandi goes something like this. Fire up the user's browser, try and connect to their email account. Now in this case, their personal email account, and you'll see why in a minute. Now, for users who hadn't logged out, who'd said, no, remember me for next time, keep me logged in for however many days your email account lets you log in without forcing you to re-enter your passwords. For many users then, they'd open the browser, go into that person's email, they'll be able to get in because there'll be cached credentials and they won't need to put in a password. And once they've got access to your email, now you imagine for business email compromise crooks, that's where they want to start sending emails to your colleagues. These crooks don't work like that. The next thing is, and there's obviously a playlist that they follow because this seemed to unfold over and over again on user after user after user. Once they've got your email account open, then they try systematically going through a list of common online accounts that people have. Now, this is an alphabetical list. It's not complete. There were others on the list, but it included, in most cases, Amazon, Best Buy, Facebook, Google Pay, PayPal, Venmo, Walmart, and others. So I just did that alphabetically, no precedence order there. And of course, for some of those accounts, if the person's left themselves logged in, they'll just instantly get into the account. But of course, it doesn't matter now because if they click, say, your Best Buy account, it goes, no, you need to put in your password. Then they just click the password reset button, jump back into the email account, click the reset link, go in. Now they're into the account. They do that for account after account after account after account, for user after user after user, using RDP to move around. Now, we don't know how many people were doing this at the same time, but you imagine with 2 or 3 people could easily run through 200 users in half an afternoon. Just even if there's no automation involved. And the idea is once they're into each account, then there's a sea of things that they want to do. Look for particular types of gift card or voucher and try and purchase them. Now the good news is, in this particular case, and one of the things that got in their way, is it seems that the majority of people whose accounts they were able to compromise, they got into their email, they took over, say, their Amazon or their Best Buy account, did a password reset, went in, tried to buy stuff, didn't work. Because those people had said, you know what, I'm not going to leave my credit card on file. I'm going to go through the hassle. Every time I want to buy something, I'll re-enter my credit card and I won't let the other end remember it. No matter how securely they might remember it, what I want to do is put a little bit of distance between me and purchasing. And the reason we suspect that that's what happened, and that's what frustrated these crooks, is that after the attack had been stopped and the crooks were kicked out of the network, quite a lot of those users reported that when they recovered their accounts and went back in, they could see gift cards waiting in their shopping cart, waiting to be purchased. So the crooks had obviously tried to buy them. It had said, no, you need to enter a credit card number. They'd gone, oh darn, we can't get away with that one. Let's try the next and the next and the next. But they were prepared to steam through the network and try and buy loads and loads of gift cards, which presumably they're then going to sell. Unfortunately, this attack, that was their primary vehicle. That was their primary vehicle for making money illegally, as far as we can see. But it wasn't all they did, and that's a problem when you've had crooks in your network. It can be difficult to find out what they did other than the obvious stuff. We've talked about this many times with ransomware crooks. You get the ransomware attack, all hell breaks loose, you get things sorted out, you get rid of the ransomware, but you've got to ask yourself, what else might they have left behind? Is there still a keylogger there? Was the ransomware a cover for something else? Did the ransomware get in because somebody else got in first? And so there's all that uncertainty about, for all that the ransomware, or in this case the gift cards may have been their primary goal, was there a secondary? In this case, unfortunately there was, because we could see that the crooks had downloaded and installed a free open source network file searching tool. And we've talked about the idea of what we call living off the land before, which is where crooks don't try and knit their own special network hacking tools or network search tools that might show up like malware, might get detected, might raise suspicion. They go for something that's well known, that lots of people use, that doesn't really look bad because most people who use it for good. And they import that software and use it for bad. In this case, they went looking around the network, and it was quite clear that they were happy to spend money on the company's credit card and buy gift cards through the company if they could, but they didn't really care whether it was each individual employee that they were ripping off or the company, or most likely both. So they went looking for data, and it was clear here that some of it was they were interested in data that might tell them more about the company or about its staff, and they were also interested in what they could find about individuals. And now this tool that they used just happens to leave a log of what it did behind. So very handily we're able to see the kind of things they searched for. And there were quite a lot, there were some common themes there, and the four main things that these guys were after when they were in the network was bank statements, because obviously that's great for identity theft, and it tells them who to go after, and it gives them things like bank account numbers, addresses and so forth. So that's for companies or individuals, wherever they could find them, on individuals' computers or on servers. They went after merchant agreements, so they knew that this company obviously takes credit card payments. So the company will have agreements, various merchant agreements with credit card or payment companies. And of course, that's a goldmine for crooks because there might be all kinds of credentials and identity related information and authentication stuff that helps you set up to take credit card payments from people. They went after payment card, credit card applications for users or the company, because of course, like a bank statement, that's another goldmine for identity theft. And interestingly, it seems that in this case, because this company has various delivery drivers for delivering their products, they actually went after data relating to drivers, people who drove for the company. So they went after the drivers' rosters and things like that. And you might think, well, why drivers of all things? Surely there's better data. Now imagine that there were two things going through the crook's mind, and that why data like that is important. One is that those drivers might be contractors. So if they can get the driver's roster, they might get a whole load of identity theft related stuff about a sea of new people who like beyond the employees of the company. So they might get a whole list of people they can attack later. And also many companies that have company vehicles, or in many countries if you have company vehicles that you allow employees to drive, you have a duty of care to make sure that those people are correctly licensed and insured, and so many companies will require you to hand over, show them a driving license, and they'll keep a scan on record so they can show the authorities, if you do something naughty in one of their cars, that they didn't just let you drive without checking up on you. And as you know, things like scans of driving licenses are commonly used for things like password resets, as proof of identity, know your customer proof, for taking over things like Facebook accounts, or even for opening bank accounts. So imagine that's what they're after there. We don't think they're able to get stuff. We could just see what they searched for, not what they took. But the key goal here was they were able to jump into a company network, presumably through one compromised computer. So they get into one computer, which means now they can mess with that person's digital life, but then they find, oh, there's a VPN, so let's see if we can get in with that. Once they're inside the network, that gives them access to computers of people who are in the office, working from the office, or back out via the VPN to people who are working from home, and they can then go through those computers one by one, seeing whether they can spend money for any of the users on the network, so that whether they spend the individual's money or the company's money or both, the crooks simply don't care. They're just trying to rack up gift card purchases that they can then put on the dark web and sell on. So that's how the attack unfolded. It's not your typical high profile, wow, read about this in the media, ransomware attack that ends in a $10 million ransom. But it could have ended in a lot of pain and heartache for hundreds of individual users and for the company. So you still want to protect against this. And of course, where these crooks, who we're assuming they're relatively unsophisticated operatives, where those guys could get in, you can bet your boots that the ransomware guys could probably get in as well if they wanted to. So what to do about it? You probably know some of the tips that are coming. I'll go through them very quickly. The first is, although it's not obvious from this story why, but I'll explain, patch early, patch often. We say that all the time. It turns out that the VPN, when we went and had a look and said, well, let's investigate the VPN, it turned out that this particular VPN had a software vulnerability that, in theory, might have been how the crooks got in. We don't think it was, but it had a vulnerability that they'd forgotten to patch for a year. So that was the good thing that came out of this. They found a hole that was there anyway that somebody else could have got in through and were able to fix it. And the fact that they hadn't done that did leave a hole. As I say, I don't think that's how these crooks got in, but who knows? You can often never be 100% sure. The second thing that would have helped a lot would be if the VPN connections required two-factor authentication. Then when they got into the person's the first individual's computer, they wouldn't have been able, it would have been much harder for them to get any further. They didn't have two-factor authentication turned on because I think it was felt to be a little bit inconvenient and users didn't like it. But guess what? They do have it turned on now. Those are two things that you could do from a sort of corporate working from home perspective. The things that you can do both from a company and a home perspective are log out when you're not using an account. Because a lot of this attack, a lot of the gift card buying depended on the crooks being able to open a browser, go into some of your accounts and find that because you hadn't logged out, they were able to jump straight back in and start trying to do stuff. It's inconvenient to log out every time, for example, from your email or from your social media accounts or your online purchasing accounts. It is inconvenient, particularly if you have two-factor authentication turned on. I have to go through it every time. But if it's that inconvenient for you, imagine how that it's that inconvenient for the crooks. And in this case, they were taking advantage of people who decided to go for convenience rather than security. And the flip side of that, of course, is review the accounts where you leave your credit card on file. I know it's very convenient to do so, and it also prevents you making mistakes for accounts that you need to pay regularly. But there's a big difference between leaving your credit card on record with, say, your electricity or your gas company so you can pay an account every month, because the only thing that you can pay with that is your own gas or electricity account. So if a crook gets in, well, they could put $600 into your electricity account that you didn't need to spend yet, but they couldn't send the money anywhere else. The problem is when you have accounts with online services that allow you to buy things like gift cards, which are specifically designed so you buy something that you pass on to somebody else so they can buy something, well, you can see where that's probably not a good idea. So again, a little bit of inconvenience goes an awful long way. And in this case, it seems many users didn't have their credit cards on file, so when they came back in later, they found that the crooks had tried to buy gift cards for several $100s on various of their accounts, but they hadn't been able to cash out. Good news. Obviously, other things that we've talked about before, but that I will mention now from a corporate point of view, have a place where people can report problems, and when those reports come in, take them seriously, because that's exactly what saved the day here. The crooks, obviously frustrated by the fact that it wasn't as easy as they thought, this is what we're assuming, they weren't able to just go into account after account after account or buy gift card after gift card. They kept having to do resets, they kept having to go in and click the button and say, no, now you need to re-enter your credit card number. Oh darn, they can't buy anything. It seems that they got frustrated and they had to do some password resets for corporate accounts, and in the process they locked out one of the sysadmins who noticed immediately, oh, something's not working with email on my mobile phone. That suggests, obviously the simple fix is go in and change his password. Now he didn't do that. He figured, well, I'll go in and change my password, but I also want to know, why did this happen? Is there a bigger cause, badder cause behind it? And that's when he promptly called upon Sophos Rapid Response. Now, in your company, you may have a team that can do that for you. If you don't, that's exactly what a team like a service like Sophos Managed Threat Response or Sophos Rapid Response is for. You know something's wrong, you know you need to react now, you don't have the time or the expertise or the spare people, so we'll jump in and help. But the real skill here was not so much the Sophos Rapid Response guys, we're very proud of them for doing this. They were able to go in and kick the crooks out and save the day, but really it was deciding to get them in the first place quickly before the crooks could actually do their half an afternoon, let's run off with $10,000. And the last thing I'd just like to mention, this is a rather special tip, and the reason for covering this particular topic is, try not to get fixated on individual parts of the cybersecurity threat landscape. It's very easy to think, you know what, it's all about ransomware. We've got some general protection in place, but what we're going to do is we're going to go and do a whole lot of ransomware specific stuff because that's what we're most worried about. In a way, that's a little bit like deciding that you will wear a seatbelt while you're driving your car, but you're only going to bother putting it on when you're on the freeway. When you're driving around town, when you're in your own driveway, when you're on local roads, we're actually more likely to have a head-on collision with another vehicle. You won't bother because, hey, nothing much happens, and it's really the high-speed driving that you're worried about. Exactly the same with network security or insecurity. You can imagine in this case, it would have been very painful for the employees at this company if the crooks had got away with $10,000 or $20,000. It would be very bad if they got away with all the data that they were looking for. They didn't do it, and if they can't do it, then you have to assume that it's harder for the ransomware crooks as well. In particular, as I mentioned, one of the things that came out of this is they decided, well, we need to be prompt about patching, say, our VPN, which means they're also going to be prompt about patching all their other servers, and we're going to use two-factor authentication because that would have helped across the board. So there you go. Thanks for listening, folks. Remember that unfortunately for the crooks, there is life beyond, before, above, to the side, below ransomware. But an attack, even of the gift card hackers like this, and apparently a supposedly unsophisticated attack, can still very much end in tears. And in this case, individual tears for individual employees, not just for the company. So be safe out there, folks. And by the way, happy Thanksgiving if you're in the US for yesterday, and stay safe because it's Black Friday. So watch out if you're going looking for bargains online. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay secure.